you've got master trust, you've got LDI, you've had DB schemes and sort of a governance to look at. There's a lot going on in the industry, you know. Yeah, everybody's just trying to get through it, I guess. And yeah, you know, you can't conjure up 26-hour days, Chris. Yeah, I suppose that's the point. And
No.
you know, it's better, as I say, I think it is better to get it right than rush it. So
Yeah, definitely.
let's wait and see. Okay, it's now 10:30. I'll start admitting people. We are now recording, so I'll start admitting people, and then we'll bring you in shortly. So let's just start admitting. Here we go. Good morning, Alan. Good morning, Amanda. Good morning, David. Morning, Gareth. Good morning, Peter. Good morning, Phil. Good morning, Simon. Morning, Stuart. If you've just joined, if you could very kindly go on mute just to cut out any background noise, so that Chris can offer his presentation. Let's just admit some more people there, which is good. And Paul, if you could mute, that would be great. Phil, if you could mute as well, that'd be good. And we'll just leave it a few minutes to go. Bring some more people in. Morning. If you've just joined, if you could go on mute, that would be fantastic. Bring a few more people in, and that's good. Thanks, everybody. Morning, Nigel. Morning, Nina. So that's all good. That's all good. And yes, there are probably bound to be a few last-minute stragglers, but let's bring them in as well. That's good. Okay, right, Chris. Welcome to Chris Curry, and welcome everybody to the Pension Playpen Coffee Morning. This week we are talking about pension dashboards, and probably on the tip of everybody's tongue is the delay with pension dashboards. So that's the elephant in the room, Chris. I've already said it, so there we go. Before we start, we are recording, so if everybody can give us a thumbs up that we can record, that'd be great. Thank you very much. That's perfect. I have explained to Chris that again, this is an informal discussion. We are being recorded, as I say, but if you have any questions, please raise a hand during the session. I'm sure Chris would be delighted to take a breather and answer any questions. I will also open up the chat. So if you want to put any comments in the chat or ask a question in the chat, that'd be good. But for many of you who have attended a number of these sessions, it's always worth just raising a hand and telling us what your thoughts are. So without any further ado, I will pass over to Chris, who's being ably assisted by Victoria, and we can start the session. So Chris, thanks for joining, and over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Steve, for that introduction as well. Delighted to be here at the coffee morning. I've got my coffee all set out, so hopefully we'll get some questions, so I'll get a chance to drink it while you're asking the questions as we go through. Delighted to be back again. I think it's probably about a year since I last did one of these, and always good to give an update on where we are on the programme. Probably not the update that I would ideally have chosen to given. I think at this stage it's fair to say, but important nonetheless that we're able to share where we are, to bring you up to speed, and also probably most importantly for the session to take your questions as to where we are. So as Steve mentioned, the elephant in the room, the delay, which I will be talking about I think quite a lot over the next 15-20 minutes or so. It is that I'm going to try and give you an update on what has come out of the written ministerial statement that you will have seen, but also to talk about what we think is coming next and what can still be going on in the industry while we're working on the issues that have caused the delay that we go through. I think it's really always important to emphasise one of the key parts for me from the written ministerial statement, because this is what we got asked quite a lot after it first came out, is that does this mean the end of pensions dashboards? And I don't think we could have made it much clearer, or the minister could have made it much clearer in the written ministerial statement, that she personally is still very much behind the delivery of pensions dashboards in the UK. The department is very much behind the delivery. The Money and Pension Service is still very much behind the delivery, and the Pensions Dashboards Programme is still very much behind the delivery of pensions dashboards in the UK. So this is not a kind of a major halt to anything. This is a delay which we are working through, but in no way undermines the commitment and the desire of the government, of DWP and the Money and Pension Service to deliver pensions dashboards. So I think it's worth getting that out there first. This is not the end of the Pensions Dashboards Programme. We're still in the middle, I think, of the Pensions Dashboards Programme, and we will continue to deliver as we go through. We're just taking a little bit of a breather at the moment to check that we're on the right course and to make sure we're going to get to the right place, would be my kind of overall summary. So I will still go through the detail. That's the kind of big overview of where we are, but kind of the brief history for where we are at the moment. You'd have seen that right at the start of this month, DWP published a written ministerial statement which was outlining changes to the mandatory connection deadlines for pension providers and schemes. So the statement was very clear in explaining that the Pensions Dashboards Programme, the organisation which I'm the principal of, is unable to meet the connection deadlines as are set out in legislation, which means that the timetable needs to be revised. Unfortunately, because that timetable is set out in regulations, that means that regulations need to be revised, which means going back to Parliament at some point in the future to amend those regulations. I think no one will be surprised to hear me say that delivering pensions dashboards is a very complex undertaking in a number of different dimensions. I mean, the governance and working on a major government programme in itself, I think, brings enough challenges with it. But it's also involving the connection of thousands of pension schemes, the accessing of millions of member records. There's a lot that we need to work on it in the Pensions Dashboards Programme to make that happen, and also a lot that industry needs to do in preparation in order for dashboards to work properly. And underlying everything that we're doing with pensions dashboards, we have to still remember and remind ourselves that we are delivering pensions dashboards for people, and actually what we want to do is to make sure that what we deliver is what people want, what people can understand, and what people can use. And so we have to make sure that that's very much uppermost in our mind as we go through the delivery of the programme and ultimately the launch of pensions dashboards. It is a major digital programme, and I think the headline of major government digital programme experiences delay is not one that many people would have been that surprised to see, even if it was disappointing to us that that's where we are at the moment. But there are several factors that have been contributing to the delays. Some additional work needed on some necessary updates to the central digital architecture that we are constructing. Some issues which I'm sure many of you have experienced as well, relating to specialist resources, and in particular those kind of technology resources. It can be a challenge if you're working in an arm's length body of a government department in the public sector, trying to attract the same talent which is working in the private sector, to make sure that you get the right individuals and those right skills into the programme as we go through. And that's something that we have struggled with, which has led to some of the work that we needed to have done in order to support industry through that connection process not being ready or not being in a good enough state to be used with the industry going forward. And it's also fair to say that we think that after doing some initial testing on the connection process that we had with our public sector partners, the Money Helper dashboard at the Money and Pension Service and the state pension team at the Department for Work and Pensions, that we felt in order for that to work well with the private sector, it would need some improvement and enhancement. And the last thing we want to do is to make things difficult for the industry right at the start of the process. And so we felt it's very important to make sure that we get that connection process right before we open it up generally. And to do that, we know that we need to do proper testing, and we're still working very closely with the early participants who have volunteered to help us test those connections as we go through, and we weren't in a position to enable them to do that testing properly over a long enough period of time before the connection window would have opened. So we took the very difficult decision, but we think ultimately the right decision, that the safest thing to do, and to make sure that we can deliver pensions dashboards safely, securely, in a way that works for the pensions industry and ultimately works for the members. It was necessary to push back the start of the onboarding process. We're not in a position to reliably support the connection in time to meet the first staging deadline, which, although would have started in April, the real deadline would have been the end of August, when the end of the first connection window would have been. And so we're not able to meet what's set out in the DWP regulations and the FCA rules, which means going back to change the timeline, change the regulations and change the FCA rules. Obviously not an ideal position to be in, but one which we are taking very seriously, and we're now in the process of the reset that was set out in the written ministerial statement, and working very closely with the Department for Work and Pensions, the pensions regulator and the FCA to establish both new timelines for the staging and the approach to staging that we're going to be taking going forward, but also a new and achievable plan for delivery, which is not just looking at the initial connection, but goes beyond the connection and what will happen once schemes have started to connect, how we'll ultimately carry out testing as part of that, how we will connect pensions dashboards to that, and actually how we'll manage that whole end-to-end journey and process that we're looking at. So it's quite a task to undertake in terms of the planning that we're doing at the moment, but we are in the middle of doing that at the moment, and we'll continue to do that and keep you updated as we go through that process. The question which I know everyone will want to ask, and so I'll get it out of the way by answering it now. Actually, it's a two-part question, but the ultimate question people want to know is, when will staging actually start again? So what are the new dates going to look like? And my honest answer to that is I don't know. So it's not that I can't tell you and won't tell you at the moment, it's that we're still working through the detail on that at the moment, and we want to make sure not only that we get it right from our own connection perspective, but also that it works well for industry, and also that it works well for the regulators who will be enforcing the connection process as well in doing that. So it's a journey that we're on at the moment, and we need a bit more information before we're able to come back with what we know will be the final set of staging timelines. This is not something we're planning to revisit a number of times. It will be one more time, and that will be the final set. And of course, the follow-up question to that is, well, if you can't tell us now, when can you tell us? And again, that's another question that we are still working on the answers to, so we're working towards that. What I can say is that in the written ministerial statement, the Minister for Pensions committed to coming back to Parliament with an update on the process and where we are before recess, which is, I think, around the 20th of July. So there'll be a parliamentary update before that date. And also, we will continue with the updates that we normally do. So we have our next progress update report is due towards the end of April. So we'll be coming out with that as usual and updating everyone as to where we are. But also, we don't think it would be very helpful for us to just disappear and hunker down in a bunker and just do all the work by ourselves. So we will be keeping a very active communication line out to the industry, but also coming back in from the industry to let you know what's happening and where we are, but also to find out what it is that you need to know and what other pieces of work you think we could be doing to help you prepare for when the windows, the connection windows do open again. But with all that in mind, it doesn't mean that that we're going to be standing still. Obviously, there's a lot of work that's going on, and some still work which is happening in developing the programme. We're not spending all of our time just replanning. We're keeping going with things that we know that we can do. But it also means, of course, that there's plenty of work that the industry can be doing. And in fact, one of the things that is not in the slide, but I think is really I always find useful to mention, is the support from the industry after we made the initial written ministerial statement has actually been incredibly encouraging and actually slightly humbling for me on the programme. The amount of support that we've had from the industry, who can see the benefit of making sure that we get the delivery of pensions dashboards right, rather than rushing to get something to meet a relatively arbitrary deadline, has been brilliant. And one of my favourite quotes, I think, comes from the press release that PASA put out around the written ministerial statement, which highlighted that actually kind of 95% of the work that pension schemes and providers and administrators need to do to prepare for pensions dashboards can be done without connecting. So actually, there is an awful lot of work that can be happening outside of the connection process and issues that we're having at the moment. So that means that by the time we do get to connection, you can be in a much better place with the data to ensure that pensions dashboards will work much more smoothly, much sooner after that connection, I think is what we are hoping. So the sorts of things that you can be looking at doing that you don't need the connection for. So and data is obviously the big issue here. So cleansing and preparing data, making sure that your data is accurate. Something which I'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes about developing an approach to matching, because matching is kind of fundamental to the success of pensions dashboards, and the data quality that you have in that space and the way you go about matching is going to be very important. And in particular, we're aware that even though the deadlines were coming up relatively quickly, there are a number of organisations out there that still haven't fully worked through or selected their approach to how they will connect when they get there. So that connection market is still developing, it's still evolving, they will still be active. And so if you haven't already decided how you're going to be connecting to the ecosystem, getting on and doing that and finding an admin or an integrated service provider to work with is going to be very important as well. There is also, I think, some additional development work that can be done. So although most of the requirements from the standards for pensions dashboards are based around information which many pension schemes already have, a lot of it is probably going to need to be provided more regularly and more quickly than is currently done within existing systems. So looking at automation of things like the calculations for estimated retirement income is also a really important thing which schemes can be doing at the moment. There is a lot of information coming out as well from the regulators, so they are updating their guidance as we speak, and it's probably very important to keep up to date with everything that is happening there. And equally, as I mentioned, the communications from the programme will be continuing I think just as much, if not more, than it was previously, and as well as our normal pensions dashboard program newsletter, which I would encourage everyone with an interest in dashboards to sign up to. In response to our work with early participants, we've also set up a new frequently asked questions newsletter, which is where we get information or requests coming in from our early participants keen to understand issues around the connection process and the programme as a whole. And rather than just answering them individually, we try and put that out in our FAQ newsletter so everyone is aware of everything that's happening on the programme at the same time. So there's a lot you can do in keeping in touch. Now, I mentioned that matching was one of the most important aspects, and certainly something where we feel there can be a lot of work still done within the industry while we are still working on the connection timeline and the process going forward. So obviously, clearly, you need accurate and up-to-date data as part of the matching process. But actually, there is not a single kind of regulated way of undertaking matching, or a single set of data matching criteria, or a set of data used for matching that is set in legislation. And so we have been very, very clear right from the outset that there is flexibility for the industry to determine themselves on the best matching approach and matching criteria based on, for example, the quality of their own data that they have, the type of membership that they have, and also the types of information that they may hold. So we know that not every scheme has exactly the same type of information. So it's really important that there is that flexibility within the industry for them to choose, each provider to choose how they match the requests that come in from pensions dashboards to their membership. There is, and again, another plug for PASA here, there is some really good guidance out there, which I'm pretty sure they are going to be updating relatively soon, which is a good way to help understand the different approaches that can be taken. So what sort of data you want to use, and not just how you will deal with a request that comes in, but how you might also deal with possible matches as well, which we think is certainly, until the data is brought up to speed, which we know will be an ongoing process, not just before dashboards are launched, but after dashboards are launched as well. There'll be some likelihood that some matches you may not be certain as to whether they are a match or not a match, and so you'll need to have protocols in place as to how you're going to follow those up and how you will handle those situations. But it's really important. There's a number of things on the screen which I probably won't go through in any detail that you can look at. But I would highly recommend that you take the time to look at what's also been described to me but by another person in the industry as a gift. So although it is disappointing that the connection is not happening as early as we had originally hoped to do that, it does mean that the industry has a little bit more time to prepare, a little bit more time to get further ahead of the curve, and a little bit more time to make sure their data is good enough, that their systems are in place, and that everything has been prepared for when they do start the connection process. And hopefully we'll be able to let you know when that is in the relatively near future. That's all I wanted to give as a broad update so far. I've noticed that there hasn't been any hands up as we go through, but I haven't kept an eye on the chat. But I've just seen Ian put his hand up. So Ian, if you'd like to go first.
Hi, Chris. Yeah, I'm just conscious you haven't had any time to have your coffee yet, and it might have gone cold by now. So I thought I would interject. So I'm a real fan of the Get a State Pension Forecast facility, which I use and I recommend to my friends to use and family. And in some ways, I think of it as it's like a state pension dashboard, in that it interrogates an external data set, and then it tells me something really useful about what I'm going to get in retirement. And I wondered what learnings you've done and your project has done from how that works and how that is successful in terms of doing that, going out, getting data, bringing back where there's a high level of need for it to be accurate. So, I'm just interested how given that model is already there, what learnings have been done from that to inform the work that you've done?
Yeah, that's really good question, Ian, and the answer is a fair amount. So we've been looking at different types of dashboards and taking the learnings from them. And as you say, kind of the Check Your State Pension is a bit like a state pensions dashboard for doing that. And actually, the information that's shown on there will be the same information that comes through and is displayed on pensions dashboards more generally. So we're looking to build on what's already there. And also looking at international experience of dashboards, as well as looking at some of the user testing that was done in the prototyping around the early versions of dashboards in the UK back in the late 2010s, and our own user testing as we go through as well, which has been very important to feed into a number of recent pieces of work. So, for example, the work or the consultation that the FCA has just had about the regulation and the regulatory framework and approach for qualifying pensions dashboard services going forward, and the standards which the Money and Pension Service have published, which run alongside that. So all of those have been informed by a lot of exactly that kind of user research to understand what it is that people can understand, what it is that they want to see, and also what we're starting to look at as well is to understand what people then want to do with that information, to make sure that they can then use it clearly in a way that's safe and secure for them to use. We're very aware of the potential for dashboards to actually make people much more attractive to people who would much rather they put their money somewhere else. And so we've got to make sure that people are aware of the consequences of what they're doing and where they can get the guidance or advice that they need in order to make that work properly. But really understanding what the customer wants and what the customer can do and what they do from existing places such as the state pension check service is really important to the remainder of this program going forward.
Yeah, thank you,
Ian. Michael.
Hello. Yeah, and Chris, I understand the sort of frustration that you sort of can't tell us when staging dates are going to move. You can't sort of say anything to the other. It makes it difficult in my line of work when I'm looking after I'm a third party administrator, sort of looking after our clients who keep coming to us and saying, okay, come to us with a project plan. You're the administrator. What data do we need to cleanse? What do we need to do? We've also got to partner with an ISP. We've got to start building our calculation because it's all DB. If we were DC, it would be a walk in the park. The DB number is not, because we've got to rack it up according to scheme rules. So the announcement sort of doesn't sort of put everyone on the back foot, but it just raises more questions. Do they stick to their original timeline? If someone, so my earliest data was going to be Feb 24, and then I've got a slew of them coming in sort of July 24. Should they still be mindful that could still be their staging date? Is there a chance that just because the big master trusts aren't going to go this August, could everything concertina together later on down the line? So instead of shifting everything backwards, could we sort of squeeze staging more into sort of one hole, and should they still have an eye on what their original staging was and still work towards it? Is there, you know, would they be, I think of the word, would they be sort of, you know, should they or can they relax a bit, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and one that we are very conscious of and very aware of. So we're aware that by saying that it's not going to be August, but we can't tell you when it is, it creates a lot of uncertainty, which is not great for the industry, which is why we're so keen to keep re-emphasising that this is not the end of pensions dashboards. This is a delay in pensions dashboards. So the work that you were planning to do absolutely still needs to be done. But what we can't say at the moment is exactly when it needs to be done by. Now, I think with some of the messages that we're going out with, and I think it's important because, as you say, we can't give you any certainty. We can't give you that clarity that people need. But we can say that if you do the work, it's not going to be wasted. And actually, if you've got it going, if it's in place, then of course, it's a question for every individual provider, every TPA, every scheme that's going to have to look at each individual set of circumstances and balance up what else is going on, what else they need to do. We know there's a lot of other things going on in the admin space as well. It's not just about pensions dashboards. No. And that's why we want to come back as soon as we can to give that clarity. But we can't give that definitive advice about stop or start. But we can try and encourage people to remind them that it definitely has to happen, and actually maybe doing it earlier rather than later just puts you in a better position. And you're more ready then when you are able to then find out when your journey will continue.
To a certain extent, it does, certainly in terms of view data. I'm not going to mention the 3 letters beginning with G. That's going to do a lot of data cleansing on that. But yeah, it's the concern they sort of then flip round is on find, because if I've got a scheme with, I don't know, 200 missing addresses, they could spend, you know, 50 quid a go with Experian or ITM or whoever trying to find these 200 people. Their staging gate gets back, you know, pushed back 2 years, and another 200 people move house and don't tell them. So yeah, they're almost trying to sort of back time their data cleanse, not to the very last possible moment, but so that when they stage, they've got the most up-to-date set of data that they have. And yeah, look, the conditional data, that's going to happen anyway, because we've got to do that, the view calculations. But it's the find, it's the surnames and the postcodes and the forenames that they don't want to spend a fortune on now, if they're going to have to spend another 20,000 quid in a couple of years' time.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, I think, because you're right. There has to be a kind of an appropriate time for each scheme to be doing this. But equally, this isn't going to be once and done. This is going to be an ongoing project, which people need to do. So it's just a question of when it starts, I think. And kind of, I guess, if you're always, if there's always going to be trying to find and trying to clean and trying to update the data. I can understand that kind of you don't want to start off an expense that you were then kind of committed to until you really need to do that. But equally, I think it will have to be done at some point. And I guess if you get some of them cleaned earlier, then hopefully the bills that come later down the track will be slightly smaller.
Well, we shall see. We shall see. A lot of trustees are keeping tight rein on the spending at the moment,
which is another completely understandable response, especially given the situation broader outside of pensions dashboards as well.
Yeah, and sort of aligned to that is anybody that was hitting buyout around their staging date. Whose responsibility is it? Is it still ours? Is it going to be the insurers? All in the mix, but you know, I'm taking up other people's question time, so I'll stop there.
That's fine. Thanks very much, Michael.
No worries.
So I've seen a question in the chat that's coming from Gareth, who unfortunately has been called away, who has said, will there be ways for pensions data to be shared with third parties if clients want to? Now, I'm presuming, I can't check with Gareth, but I'm presuming that means that when people access their information through a pensions dashboard, can they then share that information with third parties if they want to? And this is something which has been subject of or is part of the FCA regulations, which they consulted on. I think the consultation closed in the middle of February, so we're expecting them to start working through and come up with a consultation response at some point to that. And so that is, excuse me, one of the things that they did consult on specifically is when people have found that information, what can they then do with it? And it's quite a tricky one, because on the one hand, it belongs to that individual. It's their information, it's their personal information. So clearly, for pensions dashboards to be successful, you want them to be doing something with that information rather than just leaving it sitting there. So we want them to be engaged, and we want them to if they're ready and prepared and it's the right thing to do, to take action. Equally, as I mentioned earlier, we're also very aware that making things too easy might mean that people end up doing things that they might not have completely understood the implications of. And we're taking kind of looking around international experience and what happens elsewhere. So dashboards in different countries are built for different reasons. And so, for example, in Australia, I think one of the main reasons for having a pensions dashboard is to help consolidation. And in fact, there's usually a big button on a pensions dashboard that says, do you want to move all your pensions here? And you can press that button and the transfers are taken care of. That's not one of the aims of the pensions dashboard in the UK context. And in fact, there's no transactional capability within pensions dashboards. But also we need to be very careful, and the FCA are very mindful of how easy it might be for people to inadvertently enter into a consolidation piece without realizing the consequences of going that, what the charges structures they might be moving into, what the underlying investments might be, what kind of scheme they'll be in, and what protections they'll have depending on who it is who's handling that consolidation. So there's a balance to be struck in all of this. The balance the FCA has come up with is that data will be able to be exported from a pensions dashboard, but it will be accompanied by a lot of the contextual data and potential warnings that the FCA will be putting on dashboards themselves will also be on the exports that they go out. So people will be able to export that data and take them into a different environment, but they'll have to do that with a conscious decision. It's probably not going to be as straightforward as many in the industry might have liked it to have been, to make a smooth consumer journey from one place to the next. But mainly the reason for that is to make sure that people are doing this in an informed consent way, rather than being guided by the format of a dashboard or the screens that they're taken through to end up doing something that they're not completely in control of.
Chris, just on that point, does that mean a CSV or an Excel? If I don't know, if Nina, hi Nina, if Nina's on pension dashboard, done all the passwords, got all her details, she can then export that into CSV or Excel. Is that the idea? And then Nina can pass it on to an advisor, an accountant, whatever. Yeah, is that the idea?
Right. So my understanding from the FCA regulations, and again, these are only the ones that are consulted on, so they're not final. They might change when they come back. I think they were talking about CSV type file approach. So yes, you could download it into a CSV, and then you have that file there, and you can pass it on to other people if you wish to do so. But hopefully with given and taking heed of the appropriate warnings about where you might want to use that information, where it might want to go as part of that. So yeah, that's the approach that's currently in the consultation, unless I've got that wrong and Richard is about to tell me that there's a different approach.
Hello, Chris. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Richard.
Can you hear me? Good to
Yep.
see you, Chris. Yeah, no, it wasn't about that. I don't know if it's a question or a comment, really, just picking up on something Michael said, and also the Gareth question. So I think most folk know me. I'm on the PASA working group. I'm also PLSA's dashboard consultant. And on that PASA guidance, that matching guidance that Chris has mentioned, I was the lead author on that. And the whole tone of that is that data is not a one-off job. You know, it's not like get it clean for dashboard and it's done. This is forever. This is what dashboards does. It changes pensions admin from being something that's one-off. It's 24/7, 365 forever. Okay, so schemes need to be putting in place record keeping protocols that keep personal data and view data updated and accurate forever. So this is why we said in the PASA press release, 95% of the work you have to do isn't about connecting, it's about stuff you need to put in place. So absolutely, it's not a one-off task that you can maybe now delay and maybe get ready for a later staging date, if that makes sense. I think that this is resonating. I think this is probably resonating from a PDP perspective. So that's I think one thing I'd encourage everyone in industry to understand is that it's not get ready for dashboard and you're done. It's look at how you're maintaining your data forever so that you are ready when dashboards come along. And that was just one observation at what I call the back end. At the front end, folk may know the third job I do, I'm helping Money Hub, which is one of the potential commercial dashboards at the front end. And this question that Gareth asked is really part of like the customer journey, you know, of before I use a dashboard, you know, which dashboard am I going to use when I'm using a dashboard, and then what do I want to do next, as Chris has talked about. And what's really illuminating for me at Money Hub is how much testing there is to do at the front end. So a lot of this debate, Chris, has been about like back end data connection.
Yeah.
But there's an awful lot, isn't there, to happen at the front end.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
So what we're doing at Money Hub is getting on. So there's like reset. We are so busy at the front end getting ready to make our application to FCA to become a dashboard, if that makes sense, because there's an awful lot to do. And it's really, really clear to me, having done the data standards with Chris in the middle and now working at the top and the bottom with PASA and with Money Hub, that it's a vertical integration, and we have to get that end-to-end journey working, if that makes sense. So the key word that I'm trying to say to everyone in industry is we need to collaborate to get this working. And it's really encouraging, Chris, that you said about the the collaborative spirit of the reset. There's one very specific question that comes out on the export thing, which is going to be very important, and the journey and the controls around the export of your found and viewed pensions. The Money Helper dashboard from the Money and Pension Service, clearly the government's dashboard, isn't an FCA regulated dashboard because it's offered by government from an arm's length body of DWP, the Money and Pension Service. So it's not quite clear to me what data export facility will or won't be in place for the Money Helper dashboard, if that makes sense. And I think that's just one of a number of questions that will come out about the front end journey.
Yeah,
I think what we're trying to do at Money Hub is saying, let's get the debate to be about the front end now as well as the back end, if that makes sense. Because only when the back end and the front end are both in place will we actually have something that's moving towards launch.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was a question, comment.
I don't think it was a question, but I can come back anyway, Richard. I mean, it was. I mean, you're absolutely right, and I think that's one of the things we're very mindful of as we're going through the planning exercises that we're doing at the moment. Is how we can move those forward, kind of alongside each other. So ultimately, when we had an early connection deadline, we've been focused very heavily on that connection and making sure that that's in place, because you need the data in order to help feed and test the dashboards when they come through. But we know that once we have that data there's an awful lot of work, as you say, on kind of, it's interesting that to the consumer, it's the front end, to us in the program, it's the back end. It's all really confusing, isn't it? Because we're doing it backwards, almost working from the data to the front. But yeah, that needs to happen, and that's what we want to plan into, how we can do all that work, all that testing, all that, making sure it works for consumers, making sure that it's positive going forward as well. So I think that will definitely be something that we're building into the work as we go forward as part of that. And obviously we'll need to work alongside FCA as well with that authorization regime. The Money Helper dashboard, in a strange quirk of fate, is not part of the Pensions Dashboards programme, for those of you that aren't aware. So it's done by another part of the Money and Pension Service. It should and will, I think, comply with all of the FCA authorization regulations and requirements, even though it doesn't need to. We think that's just really important to do with a level playing field. So my expectation would be that the export would be exactly the same from the Money Helper dashboard as it would be from anywhere else. But again, that's something that we'll be able to confirm and update as we go through the process over the coming months. Interestingly, Richard, I think there might be a question for you rather than for me in the chat. So Nina's asking about ongoing record keeping and keeping personal data up to date. What kind of tips do you have? How do you encourage scheme members to keep you informed when they move?
Yeah, so one generic, one specific. So generic, yeah. There are lots and lots of data firms who'd love to talk to you about that, Nina. One example, you may have seen, LCP did some research that was published last week, and they've done some work with a couple of credit agencies about the methods they use for maintaining records. On a specific, I think we need to forget address. So ABI did some research in 2020 that found that only 1 in 25 people tell their pension scheme provider when they move house, so 4% records for that. So the PASA guidance says, like, focus on national insurance number, surname and date of birth, you know, and if you're going to spend any money on this, work on getting those right, if that makes sense. And then the supplementary to that is, if you have to use postcode, maybe is really look at the sophistication of your possible matching criteria. And again, this is a front end, back end thing. So Richard, here are 3 pensions we found for you, and here are 2 that might be yours. So that possible matching experience, how's the individual going to feel when they see that, and how are they going to react? I think, Chris, on the early money helper testing, people felt they were being scammed, didn't they? Because they didn't recognize the names. They didn't recognize the names of the 2 schemes that might be yours, because they've changed since they were in the schemes 30 years ago. So the user journey around a possible match resolution is really one of these really important things we need to do a lot of work on testing.
Yeah, and it's really important, because, as you say, if people come to a dashboard and feel like they're not safe, and they feel like they're being scammed, or if all they get is kind of possible matches, and they kind of find it very difficult to actually work through that and find out definitively if it is one of their pensions or not one of their pensions, then actually we've got a very bad user journey, and it's not going to be something which people want to repeat. So we've got to make sure we can work with the industry to help them with that, and make sure that we end up getting the best outcomes for the consumers that we can. Alan.
Morning, and thanks very much for your presentation. I was wondering whether sort of the dashboard program and industry in general is going to take the opportunity of the reset to actually revisit a couple of points. So sort of 2 of my bugbears are, first one, not having any pensions on the pensions dashboard. Seems bizarre to me that it's only POCs and deferreds.
Yeah,
I'd have thought the messaging to people of come and see all your pensions in one place, and they log on and go, oh, that one that landed in my bank account last month isn't there. That doesn't strike me as a good first impression. And then linking into the finding and matching piece, not including national insurance number in the messaging protocols that go around, again seems bizarre. I wouldn't want to put it into a requirement for the user to put it in, but once one pension scheme finds it and adds it into the messaging that goes around the network, it just makes the matching so much easier and reliable.
Yeah, two really good points and 2 good challenges. So what the written ministerial statement said is that the framework for pensions dashboards is the right one and will continue going forwards. So I'm pretty sure there won't be much change, because both of the things you've mentioned, I guess, actually are kind of in the policy space that are kind of owned by the Department for Work and Pensions, rather than necessarily kind of decisions taken by the Pensions Dashboards Programme, especially the decision about the scope of which pensions are shown and aren't shown. I think there's an acceptance that eventually, I think it would be helpful to see pensions in payment alongside the other pensions, as you said, for people who know they have that pension. The argument for not having them is one, it just increases the complexity at the moment, and we think it's a big enough task as it is to try and get the ones that are already there. And also, if one of the primary reasons for having the pensions dashboard is to help reconnect people with pensions they're not aware that they have, or to help find and trace pensions they've lost track with, if one's already being in payment to them, then it's probably not so important for them to find. Clearly is important on some of the other purposes for pensions dashboards around planning and understanding and all those kinds of things. So I think that there's probably going to be a longer game on that one as to when that does become part of dashboards going forward. The national insurance number is one that's fraught, I think, and I think one of the reasons why it's not part of there is kind of in verification processes generally. The national insurance number isn't used and isn't seen as being a very good way of identifying. I think actually that kind of, if you look at the verification stuff, that there's no real way outside of HMRC, and it's very difficult to get access to HMRC to verify someone's national insurance number. And we know that there's a lot of issues, both in terms of the data that's stored by pension providers and individuals' own understanding and kind of recall and recognition of their national insurance number as part of that. Having said that, is the closest thing to a unique identifier that we have, and I think the testing that we've been doing has been been not quite making it compulsory, but giving as much encouragement as you possibly can that the people put in national insurance number in order to do that. And so I think that is something that we'll be kind of looking at as we go through the testing and seeing what we can do in order to give as much chance as possible of having something as good as a national insurance number, even if it's not perfect. We know there are cases of duplicate national insurance numbers or people having more than one national insurance number as well as part of that, so we can't rely on it solely. But I think we do recognise that it has a very important role to play in that matching criteria in particular.
Okay, thanks. I'll just throw in something else on that, because I challenge you a bit about it being the widest distributed unique identifier. I think we've seen in the last couple of years a new one probably overtake it, which is our NHS IDs.
Yep. That's an interesting one as well.
And I think that'd be something to learn from if you look at the NHS app in terms of identifying things and matching people. In that's probably about the most successful one that's from government in the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right. I guess the challenge there is getting that an NHS number to pension schemes and getting them attributed to every individual pension. Yeah. I think that's the challenge, which could be an extension, it could be a development, it could be something in the future, but I think that's the challenge at the moment. But it's an area that we are continuing to evolve and develop as we go through.
Chris, just following up from Alan's point on the dashboard theme, especially about the open banking bit. If you had a magic wand, Harry Potter moment, do you think that could exist and be achievable in, say, 3 or 5 years? So the dashboard says pensions in payment on one side and pensions not in payment on the other side. I mean, how far away are we from achieving that? I know it sounds complicated, but we are now in a digital world. So
yeah, we are. I think realistically we're still a way off of that. So kind of the pensions dashboards in particular, I think are almost a precursor to open pensions and bringing pensions into the rest of open finance and linking with open banking in particular. There is still a massive job to be done by the industry to get the data in a place that it works for dashboards. And that needs to happen in order for any other kind of digital work to progress beyond that. I think we're probably still a reasonable way off kind of getting to a position where we have all of that information in a way that's compatible and comparable and can be compared and contrasted and used against other forms of financial data in going through. As I said, my focus at the moment is on getting the information to the individual and making sure that it's presented in a way that they can understand, that they understand the context around what they're seeing as well, and that they get the right information that is relatively accurate for the purposes for which it might be used. So I think once we can get that, then actually it may be not too far, not too distant to be able to do extensions and to move into different areas. But I think, and especially given the fact that we've just announced the delay, it's complex enough as it is already at the moment. And so I think that will be the focus for the next 3 to 5 years.
Steve, Chris, can I just add a thought on that? Because I absolutely agree with that, Alan. It's going to be disappointing. You know, when we did the data standards in 2020, you know, this was a big question. I mean, I've got a pension already in payment, and it breaks my heart I'm not going to see it on a dashboard. And we know from the international evidence, don't we, Chris, that the most users are like 55 plus. You know, and in our diverse sort of, you know, great resignation, great returners, great confused, what am I doing type world, you know, some pensions are going to be in payment. So the totality of your retirement income is going to be a mix, isn't it? And it's going to be weird. They had this problem in Sweden, which is, oh, I've got 3 pensions, bring one into payment and it disappears. You know, so it's a real problem. But we had to focus, didn't we, Chris? You know, if the initial point is to find lost pensions, connect you with what you've got building up, that's what you have to do. And interestingly, one of the other things was the data complexity you talk about there, Chris, right? So you'd think, you know, it can't be that hard, but a pension and accumulation is fundamentally different data set from a pension being received. And then you've got all this other pesky stuff like drawdown and UF pluses and cash and da. So it made the data set much more complicated than just showing pensions in accumulation. So that's why it just wasn't achievable, even though it is going to be disappointing. So one of the big things that FCA is saying is you need to make it really clear to the user you're not going to see pensions in payment on this thing called a dashboard. But just picking up on Steve's question and what you said there, Chris, I'm just thinking from an open banking, open finance perspective, and again, thinking with my Money Hub hat on, one thing is to get the pension from the provider, the source, like the annuity provider or the scheme that's paying you an income, you know, it's now in payment. But the other thing is to go to your bank account and saying, oh, we can see you've got an income coming in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think another way to think of this isn't to think of it as coming from the pension scheme or annuity provider, but getting it from your bank account to say we can see there's an income stream there. So I think we will find other ways to get to a totality of pension, some of which could still be in accumulation, some of which might be in receipt as a regular income. And that might be a cleaner way to do it, frankly, because the variety of ways in which people can take pensions now is just incredibly complicated. Yeah. And I'm not sure we could get a universal data set to crack it in the same way we could for accumulation.
Richard, sorry, that's a great point. And I know there's a couple of other questions coming on, but can I ask a bleeding obvious question? I'm having a John Cleese moment here. If you ask 100 pensioners, how much is your pension a month? I guarantee probably 99 of them will know how much their pension is. So why can't you have a box? If you're in your own bit of the dashboard, why can't you just put your pension in a box and your system saves it? So, you know, if I'm a pensioner and I know my pension is £1,000 a month, just for this totalitarian or whatever expression you will use, Richard, total view, why can't you just put it in self-service, plug it in, click, done? It's in there. Next time I go in May, that £1,000 a month pension is in there. It's just part of the picture. Why can't an individual plug in self-service into their own bit? That's a really stupid question, but is there a silly answer? Have I missed something?
I don't think there's a silly answer, but I think that what you're describing, I think, is almost what we'd see as being one of the onward journeys from a pensions dashboard. Yeah. So the dashboard contains the context and the information, what we'd expect, and I think what the FCA are expecting is that information, when it's exported, can go into some of these planners, for example, that will help you understand, help you look at what the impact might be of changing contributions, what the impact might be of working longer, but equally might have spaces for you to input other information alongside that if you have that information. I guess one of the challenges is helping people understand what information they might want to put in, but if it's a pension in payment, then they should have that information, they should understand it. It works well with annuity, it might not work so well in a drawdown, whereas there's a lot more flexibility as to when people take it, but these are challenges I think that at least we can try and address them once we have that basic information there for doing it. So yeah, I think you're right, this will be an onward journey from a dashboard, and it will probably be the sort of thing that could be tailored.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. We've got a question. Andy Young, do you want to ask your question? If you're still on the call, Andy, I think. Okay. What about Peter Cameron Brown? What about the marker that MPAA applies?
So I think the challenge with the marker is whether schemes will know that applies in every sense. So I can take that one away and have a look and see what it is. I think we're starting to get into the detail that I might not know all of the answers to, but other people will do. So I can take that one away and see what comes back from the team on that one.
Okay,
Alan, I can see Andy on screen now as well if he wants to ask his question.
Sorry, Andy, go on. Yeah.
No, sorry, I was doing something else at the same time. My question is, I'm a deferred pensioner, both deferred in the state scheme and in one of my employments, and I'm in receipt of a pension from an earlier employment. So what will I be able to see on the dashboard? I am 73, so if that matters.
So, and looking very good on it, Andy. I think you should see both of your deferred pensions, but you won't see the one that's in payment. So it's not an age criteria, or it's not triggered by drawing one pension. It's a pension specific. So if that pension is deferred and you're still a deferred pensioner for that scheme and for the state scheme, then that information should be shown on the dashboard.
Ah, very good. I think that's different from what it used to be, because I always thought because I was over state pension age and a deferred state pensioner, indeed from the previous state pension system, that wouldn't be included, but it's good to know if it is.
Thanks.
Excellent. Okay. Alan, you got your hand up, or we can come to
Oh.
Amanda after you, Alan. You go
Yeah.
first, Alan.
Oh, it was a link to the MPAA piece, which I wouldn't have thought would really be a marker, and particularly pensions on there. The dashboard's not going to know if pensions are being drawn or not anyway, so it wouldn't know about that. But in general, this type of thing where it's something which applies across the totality of your pension savings is something I'd have thought the dashboard infrastructure would actually be able to facilitate, because rather than having to tell other pension schemes about something, when you take a pension out or take a lump sum out of one pension, you're meant to tell your other pension providers about it. No, I doubt anybody ever does, apart from the handful of people who've got IFAs who do it for them. Whereas actually the dashboard infrastructure, I hope it's been done in such a way that it's just a messaging system, can just pension scheme, when they make a payment, will just fire a message off to the dashboard, which then distributes it to every pension that's connected. And that goes back to the maintaining contact details as well. I mean, I would hope that when one pension scheme gets notified of a change of address, it pings a message to the dashboard that sends it to every pension scheme, whether or not it sends the actual data around, but at least sends a message to say this member has updated their contact details.
Yeah. So I'm not sure it necessarily will work in that way. And I think we've looked at those kind of things, and some of the issues we come across are generally GDPR and that data sharing information. And so the construction is very much that the only person who sees all the information together is the individual through their dashboard, and it's not really shared back with any other schemes. So none of the other schemes will know that they've got pensions elsewhere as part of that, because all they know is they've had a request and they send the information back out. It doesn't come back with that. We're looking at it at kind of, are there ways we can use it to clean data that we can do that? But I think that's probably likely to be another further extension of the architecture that we built. I think it could be used to do that, but the way it's currently designed and currently set up, I don't think it will allow for that kind of information to be shared, because it really is at the moment just for the individual to see their own information, rather than for it to be necessarily that feedback, unless they get into the possible matches, in which case then you do set up a dialogue with the scheme.
Okay, good. Richard, you've got your hand up as well. Another question maybe, or a point?
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, these dialogues are so good because one thing triggers another, doesn't it? Two things very quickly on the data thing. My vision, I think, I don't know what you think, Chris, but I don't think the central, the PDP search architecture is really geared up around, data maintenance. I think we might find we have sub ecosystems outside of the dashboard's ecosystem that look at data maintenance and this sort of, this multi-messaging thing that Alan was talking about. The other point, the reason I had my hand up was Andy's thing, and this is a question for you, Chris. I think the one thing we're missing, we've had your design standards on how, dashboards must display the information. What that doesn't include is state pension. I think we're still waiting for some DWP authored display standards explicitly for state pension. And I think that's coming soonish. Did I miss that? Did you mention that earlier? I'm not sure.
No, I didn't mention it earlier, but you're absolutely right. So there is a separate set of display standards that DWP are producing for how the state pension needs to be displayed on dashboards as well. So that should be coming.
Is that one of these? Is it one of these things where you don't know whether you can tell us what you can't say?
No, I just don't know when it's coming, to be honest. Okay. Actually, that could just be my own complete ignorance of when it's coming, rather than anyone else not knowing when it is.
And I think edge cases like Andy's will probably be covered in messaging, I believe, in there, because I think that is already a situation in Check Your State Pension, for people who are over state pension age.
Yeah.
But there'll be lots of edge cases, I think, on state pension that'll have a lot of messaging. Again, all needs to be tested.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. There's another comment in the chat. Peter, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, this may be a naive question, but I had heard that there were going to be possibly multiple dashboards available to the individual. You could go into various ones. I was just wondering how you, am I correct in that? And if so, how do you ensure the information provided across the alternative access routes is consistent and up to date?
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thanks very much, Peter. Very good question. You are right. There will be multiple pensions dashboards that individuals can access. And the system has been designed specifically for that, in order to firstly help people find dashboards. We're not expecting them to necessarily go out looking for them, but they might come across them if there's a number of them in different places. And also to try and encourage some innovation, I think, in the dashboard space as well. The information is very tightly controlled as to how it's shown on pensions dashboards. That's the point of the FCA regulations and the design standards that Rich have just been talking about, which the Money and Pension Service put together. And the numbers that will be sent back will be exactly the same and identical if they're asked for at the same time to every single dashboard that comes out. So the numbers will be identical. They might change if you look on a different day, but then they change if you looked on the same dashboard on a different day. So the numbers that come out and the context around it, and a lot of the things and the regulation and standards will be agnostic of which dashboard you use to look on it. So whichever dashboard you look on, you should get the same information. Might just be presented slightly differently depending on how much flexibility there is ultimately between the standards and the regulations as we go through. So it should be completely consistent, and each dashboard will be as up to date as any other because they all receive exactly the same information from the providers.
They interrogate the information at that time of inquiry, do they?
That's right, yeah.
Thank you.
Just along that theme, Chris, just one final point because we're nearly running out of time. There's been some movement on small pots. Do you think small pots is going to hinder the accuracy of any dashboard? Because, you know, as I think Richard said earlier, 24/7, 365, there could be pots in transit, if you see what I mean, on any day of the week. So is small pots a bit of a small, big issue?
No, so there are kind of in the standards that we use, there are ways in which we deal with pots in transfer and when they've moved, and how long the receiving provider has in order to add that to make it dashboard ready and dashboard available. So there may be some issues. I think if there are lots of pots moving around, I've yet to see exactly what automatic transfer mechanism is likely to be put in place. And I think once we get more information there, we'll be able to see a little bit more about how that might impact or influence on dashboards. But I mean, ultimately, dashboards we think are helpful towards the small pots. First, it will help people become aware of them. Hopefully, if they start to look for them, and hopefully because of the way in which the data is being standardized across the industry for dashboards, that might also be something that can be leveraged when we get into looking at, for example, some automatic transfers, those kind of issues as well. I mean, it's not the same thing. Dashboards aren't going to be the mechanism used for automatic transfer of small pots, but there are certainly some things that we're doing which will be of use in that space.
Fantastic. Okay. Phil Hodges is just asking, what is the average number of pots per person? Have you got any statistics on the average number of pots per person? Because if you've got one pot, there's not a lot to download on a CSV, apparently.
There's not a lot, but most people have a state pension as well, so there's generally at least two. I think the average is probably somewhere, it's changing. The last set of figures I saw was somewhere between 3 and 4. It's not massively, so it's not like multiple numbers, but there's a wide distribution. I think it depends where you look, Michael, as to exactly how many there are. But I think that there is a wide distribution across those who have been long-serving public servants, for example, who have a relatively small number, and those who have started work since 2012 and worked for 4 different employers and have 4 different pensions by the age of 28. So that it's going to be increasing, and we think it is increasing over time.
Okay, fantastic. Brilliant. I've got to say, Chris, thank you so much for a fantastic presentation. My last question, I guess, before we go would be, how actually is the general public going to hear about this and be promoted? What is the plan and what is the budget? Is that something you can tell us about? Or?
So
budget zero. Yeah.
The general public will hear about it. Again, this is another space because we are part of a wider set of government policies. This is a kind of DWP lead in this space, so it will be kind of coordinated by the Department for Work and Pensions. I mean, there's a number of ways in which we think we can do it. I think it's going to be likely to be a build-up over time. What we don't want to do is to let people hear about them too soon before they're available, so people start looking for them and they don't exist. That's one surefire way to disappoint potential users of pensions dashboard. So we'll be building up to that. In legislation, there is a 6-month notice period that the industry will get before pensions dashboards go live. I'd imagine that would be the kind of time period which will start to really ramp up the communications to potential members, so they understand what's likely to be available and when, and so kind of when pensions dashboards hit the ground running, there'll be plenty of people looking to access them. And good luck, Ian, with the train's Wi-Fi.
HS2 and new Wi-Fi, yeah. Good luck, Ian.
Thanks, Chris. It's my dream. I'm a pretty sad person. What a great moment that'll be.
with your drum machine.
Absolutely, yeah.
Pension on one hand, drum machine on the other. Fantastic. Sounds
Indeed.
good. Okay, Chris, thank you so much for that. I think we've had some great feedback already from people. Really appreciate your input and your time. Some great questions. I think we might have this again at some point, because it sounds like it's an ongoing feast of questions and implications. So we might see you again this time next year, maybe, Chris. You know, so
very happy to, Steve. Always happy to share updates, and I'm sure there'll be more to share.
That's fantastic. Next week we have Rafa talking about the markets and investments. So that's going to be quite an interesting case, bearing in mind the recent turmoil with banking stocks and everything else. So that'd be quite interesting. And if you're not a member of Playpen, please join. And if you are a member of Playpen, please invite others to join as well. We really appreciate your comments and your input. And if you want to blog or post events, you can do so on Playpen. So as usually say as well, let's pray for peace in the East. Can't believe it's nearly April and still praying for peace in the East. And we hope that you all have a great day and a great week. And thanks again to Chris for his input, and also for Victoria for running the slide. So brilliant stuff. Enjoy the rest of your day, and the video of today will be up later on this afternoon. So enjoy everybody's day and evening. So thanks for joining, everyone. See you later. Bye.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, Chris.